It is my pleasure to be able to welcome you to our first college site visit. Related to guided pathways, we will have several more over the next 18 months. And this is just one of 6. So this is something that we will continue to work on as we continue to grow in the movement of transformation around guided pathways within Maricopa. So you'll see that this will become relevant to the things that we are growing, doing, planning, implementing as we're moving towards that process of transformation over the next 18 months. So I have the pleasure also of introducing our consultant who will be assigned to us over that 18 months as well, and that's Dr. Kay McClinney. She prefers that we don't read her whole bio, but I'll just go over a few highlights so that you know who she is. She is an independent consultant and partner with MC2 Consultants. She serves as senior advisor to the president and CEO of the American Association of Community Colleges and was the founding director of the Center for Community College Student Engagement at the University of Texas at Austin from 2001 through 2014. There's so much more that we could say about her being essentially a tastemaker for the things that we do in our community colleges across the nation. She has her finger on the pulse of the things that we need to be knowing what to do to support our students in the community colleges across the nation as well. And so we are very lucky to have her here. So please help me to welcome Dr. Kay McClinney.
And thanks to all of you. Thanks to Tanisha. I'm really happy to be here. She talks about my having the finger on the pulse. You have the finger on the pulses of your students. And I get to spend a lot of time on community college campuses, and I always love it because it keeps me honest, because I hear from you. And I've done hundreds of focus groups with community college students, and so the student voice in all of this work is really important to me, and I know important to you. Demystifying, guided pathways demystified. So some of you have done that. All right. So what you're going to see here is some overlap, but that paper is directed not exclusively, but mainly toward faculty. And so a request that came to me from Paradise Valley was, can we talk about pathways demystified for advisors, for people who work directly with students, whether in advising or financial aid or other kinds of programs. And so that's what I'm up to here. And if it doesn't match up with your questions, then we'll still discuss those questions when we get through. Is that okay? Good, that's really good. Okay, so I'm going to give you the background on this. Some of you have read that paper, and you'll know. Dr. Johnson is part of the consulting team. We are here as part of his organization, which is called the National Center for Inquiry Improvement. He is one of the national partner organizations that works with me at AACC on the National Pathways Project that we've been running for the last 3 years. And that's along with others like CESI at University of Texas and the Community College, the Center for Community College Research at Teachers College Columbia, and blah, 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 you know, a bunch of alphabet soup. So after being on a lot of campuses in a lot of different locations, he, together with colleagues, said, okay, here are the questions we hear all the time about guided pathways, and that produced that first paper called Demystifying, Guided Pathways Demystified, that talks about a lot of questions. And you can go to his website or go to the AACC website and find that paper. Then, after a while, new questions. We started out with 10, and new questions kept coming up that were less about the philosophical and educational underpinnings of guided pathways, less about the question of why would we do this, more about the question of how do we do it, and how do we do it well, more about implementation. And so there's a part 2 now of questions about implementation, which, if you haven't seen them, good read. But we're skipping both of those, and we're going directly to these questions, which I did on the airplane on the way here. So you're my guinea pigs to help me. Am I getting the questions right? Are there other questions you have? And to just talk through these things. So as I said, some of them overlap. And I put this one up because I've heard, maybe not from you directly, but I've heard across Maricopa, some people talk about initiative fatigue. Does that ring any bells? Maybe it's not an issue at Paradise Valley. But one of the things community colleges in general have been very good at is inventing cool stuff, especially League for Innovation colleges. You know, innovations, strategies, shiny objects that we implement. And then people get kind of tired. Or people say, what's next? Or, you know, reform du jour, or that sort of thing. And so we're going to deal with that question in a moment and talk about how it's different. Some people, fewer advisors, but some people ask this question about, you know, aren't we about sorting people really? About deciding who's worthy and who's not? Isn't this a meritocracy where the strong and smart succeed and others just fall off the ship? This is a big one, and I think we need to spend some time on it. Isn't this what college is about? Is exploring, finding myself, finding my way, that sort of thing. And so we'll come back to that. We do have people who worry about whether we're becoming coddlers, whether there's too much hand-holding and that will cripple students' ability to navigate the world once they get out of college. Now, here's one that came directly from people at Paradise Valley. How do students be accepted to make career decisions at such a early age? And aren't they going to, doesn't all of this structure mean that we're going to lose control over our jobs and the way we do our work? This is a related question. I'm not sure how these got in this order. Don't students change careers 4 to 7 times? The answer is yes. And so why are we doing guided pathways if that's going to be the case? What happens if students change their mind? Paradise Valley question. How does that get dealt with within a guided pathways model? Are you identifying with any of these so far? Okay. Not all of our students are able to attend college full-time. What I will say to you is that the data clearly show, you know this already, that students who attend full-time are far more likely to graduate. But here's one you may not know. Students that attend full-time even one semester are far more likely to graduate. Why would that be? We could ask ourselves and talk about it. What do we do in the guided pathways model about the issue of academic management compared to students? 67% of the students in Maricopa colleges are assessed as needing some level of academic skill development. So we cannot ignore that reality as we do this work. What if they start enrolling in courses that are not in their program pathway? What's the role of an advisor or counselor when that happens? And this one, which is really, really important to me. I'm pretty confident that it's important to you, and it's really relevant to the work of people on the front lines of interacting with students and advising capacity and financial aid and veterans affairs and other kinds of offices around. So those are the beginning questions. And so as I said before, if you have questions you're not seeing there, then hold that thought so that we can try to get to them during this time we have together. All right, so the first one. I'm not through with all the questions yet, so please know the whole page. We want to talk about how there are a lot of sort of shifts in perspective and the way we structure and organize our work under a guided pathways model. I can confidently say that virtually everybody's work will be affected by this model, and so it's reasonable to try to anticipate and speculate about what that may mean for advisors. Does an advisor work really more? We're talking about more advising. More advising. Technology supports, and how are we going to do this anyway? Sounds like a lot of work. It is. It is a lot of work. And one of the questions I'll ask you is, what if you stop doing it? Okay. The call to conversation. Let's go back and start at the beginning. Isn't it just the next education fad? There is an understandable tendency among people on campuses to say, you know, if we just hold our breath and wait long enough, this will go away. This too will pass. And I've actually told people in leadership positions that if they're not getting pushback, if they're not getting hard questions from faculty and advisors and others, it's because you don't believe they're serious about making these changes. Because if you just wait long enough, it will go away. Or because, I mean, somebody said to me yesterday, we don't usually finish stuff at Maricopa. We do something, we launch something, and then we move on to the next thing. I'm seeing some heads nodding. Whatever it is, people have reason to wonder if this isn't just the flavor of the day, right? So how is it different?
You know, to me, that question is, I think people are believing that we will have curriculum pathways.
Yeah.
How that's going to look at each college is uncertain because we share programs, how that's going to be adjusted because of university requirements that change. I think the more doubt is on the tougher stuff.
The what?
The tougher, the data and the faculty teaching. I'm going through that rediscovering community colleges model.
Yeah. Redesigning.
Yeah. I think those are the ones that are more controversial. I don't think anyone's going to argue about having clear pathways.
The sort of conceptual notion of that's a good idea for students. Yeah. Okay. So the devil's in the details. Right. And there are predictable places in the process of planning, designing, and implementation where some people are going, whoa, wait, hold on a second, can we talk? So, thank you for that. The argument that I want to make here is that guided pathways is clearly emergent from the work we've been doing in colleges for the last decade and a half. Your learning college work, the work you've done on the entering student experience, the things you've done to focus on pedagogical approaches, all of that is part of this and it's valued. But what we've learned from all of these efforts is that our discrete interventions and strategies don't add up to the kinds of improvements in the big needles moving on completion, on equity, closing achievement gaps, that sort of thing. And so we kind of hit the ceiling on how far we can go by having just a collection of cool stuff going on in the college. And so this is about helping to scale the things that are really important for community college student success and integrate those experiences into a coherent experience for what it means for a student to go to college in the Maricopa colleges and in particular Paradise Valley. So it's a scaling and integrating thing based on what we've learned about the limits of our past work. Is the best way I can put it. And so it should have some momentum attached to it because you've made investments in the things that you've done before, the orientation of the student success courses and the advising improvements and that sort of thing. This point. The cafeteria model you're reading about in redesigning America's community colleges. And that's the model that we've gravitated for since at least the 1960s as, here's all the stuff we've got, good luck. There is, I mentioned earlier, an article in Newsweek magazine a couple of years ago called I Can't Think that summarizes the brain science about decision making and choice making in human beings. And what it says is, confronted with too much information, what our brains do is basically either start making bad decisions because we're making them emotionally out of the wrong side of the brain, or we make a decision based on what our sister or our brother or our cousin did. Most community college students report, by the way, that their major source of advising is what? Friends and family. Is that the best possible source of good information? And no, okay. So, or your brain literally shuts down and leaves the premises. And you do one of two things as a student. You either wander aimlessly around the curriculum, collecting credits, or you leave, you just leave. And so that's what we're trying to do, is to create choice architectures and decision-making structures for students, not to remove choice, but to help them make good choices, informed choices, based on not what we like, what's convenient, what my favorite discipline is, but on what their goals are. We are still confronted by realities that we don't much like, and some of them are about economic and social divides in our country, that the American middle class is shrinking, that average family income is shrinking, that a child born poor in America is more likely than ever before to stay poor throughout his or her lifetime, that students who are really bright and well prepared who are poor are far less likely to go to college and complete a college education than people who are less academically qualified but wealthy. Got that? And that remains the case. That divide is not narrowing. So when I was co-chair of the 21st Century Commission on the Future of Community Colleges 4 or 5 years ago, we looked at all of this data, and the commission said, if those trends are going to be reversed in the United States of America, most of the heavy lifting for that reversal is going to occur in community colleges. But only if we are willing to rethink the educational experience that we provide to our students so that more of them make it through the process and complete the degree, and that more diverse students complete the degree and achieve it also. So, I don't want to do that. I want to go on. So I have a friend who works with Guided Pathways in North Carolina, and what he says is Guided Pathways is not something we're doing. It's something we're becoming. It's not, like a project that you want to say this has a beginning and the end. It is what you are endeavoring to become as a college, to provide that more structured, clearer, and educationally coherent pathway for students. So these are all things that we've said so far. So that meritocracy thing, is that I find that this is not commonly an issue for people in student services in community colleges. Anybody want to speak to that? No? Yeah.
I just have a question that I wrote down, and maybe you'll come to it later, but I'm wondering if public perception has changed of what a community college's role, because back in the late 1800s, we were established to help the underprepared, under-resourced. And as time and the Industrial Revolution came, now we become the occupational side, career ready. Is there a general consensus that the role of a community college is changing?
That's a really good question, and I think that there's an increased understanding that the role of community colleges is comprehensive. That is, that we do all of those things, and that we're still preparing students, the junior college model, the transfer model, and that we're preparing students for careers. And in fact, the lines between those things are blurring, because some of our biggest transfer potential is going to be in information technologies and engineering and even health careers, places that we typically thought of as being career and technical education. But as a more pointed response to your question, I'm going to say something that is intentionally provocative but true. And it is, when community colleges were first established with William Rainey Harper College out of the University of Chicago, it was established to keep the riffraff and the people of color out of the University of Chicago. And so that's our history, people, and we need to acknowledge it and say that we have, isn't that ironic that these institutions that so value diversity and opportunity and equity were founded as a solution to not having to deal with that? Do you understand what I'm saying? And so I want to own that and come back and talk in a minute about the equity lens that we need to bring to the Guided Pathways work in order to make sure that we are not inadvertently perpetuating social and economic divides in our country. So will you hold that thought with me, and we'll come back. Okay, so let's pause here because a lot of people have a lot of good questions about this notion of exploration and what college is for and that kind of thing. And I'm going to apologize to my steering team and tri-chair colleagues who are hearing this spiel more than once today. Here are some thoughts about exploration. One is that if we think that's such an important function of higher education, why is it that we have done somewhere between little and nothing to support exploration in a systematic, productive way that leads to a result? What we do is not exploration, it is we allow aimless wandering. There's a difference between purposeful exploration and aimless, supported exploration and aimless wandering. And so the result of the aimless wandering phenomenon is this. How many of you know the average number of college level credits earned by a student who completes an associate degree at one of the Maricopa colleges?
I think it's 80.
It's 91.75. So find out what it is at Paradise Valley. I'll know that data when I come back. But it's not good. And so, as I said to the group before you were here, there's no argument that you can make that will convince me that it's okay to have 91.75 as the average number of credits. Now you have to dig in, you can ask questions and all of that. But what that means basically is that you're consistent with all of American higher education, where the most common outcome of student experience in higher education is accumulation of credit and debt and no credential. That is not okay. And that's one of the very large issues that we're attempting to address with the Guided Pathways model. So, yeah, we can support exploration. There are ways we can do that. One is that you will end up, as other pathways colleges do, with student-facing information that's wonderful. We have some terrific websites you can look at where a student can go to the St. Petersburg College website and see their meta majors, that they don't call that, I can't remember what they call them, fields of interest, I think. And they can say, oh, I'd like to see what STEM is or what arts and humanities is, and then you click on the meta major, and some of them have a video that talk about the programs that are in it or students that talk about it. They all have their program maps included in it, and in the most sophisticated versions, you will be able to look at a program and see not only what the course sequence is for the entire program, but also, upon completion of that program, what are your transfer pathways? And what are the jobs and careers that are available and the starting and median salaries in your region for students with a certificate and then an associate degree and then a bachelor's degree and then a graduate program. And all of that has behind it live databases that automatically update it so that you're not showing students data that are out of date. So that's one form. That's the median form of exploration. And then in the context of your student success course, we were talking about this morning. If upon entry students make an initial choice of a meta major, which we won't call meta majors, a cluster of related programs, like so it could be health careers or business or STEM, then within that first semester, contextualized to the meta major, right? They're going to have further opportunities to learn more about the programs of study within that meta major. They will decide that they hate accounting and love marketing. They will then complete a full program academic plan before the end of that first term, probably in the context of that course. You with me so far? These are decisions that need to be made. I'm sort of speculating here, right? All right, so that's exploration. I will tell you there are some colleges, too, that say for the determinedly undecided, that what you do is create an intentional exploration semester that has more and broader exploration about the meta majors, about potential careers, about transfer opportunities and the like. And so you always have the option to do that. What else do we need to say about that? Yeah.
So, my understanding, I'm a counselor, I've been, doing this for 20 years, and I think most students don't want to just wander. They would love to have a path. What they don't like is taking multiple classes and then having, then changing their mind because they started on the wrong path. And so as a career counselor, I see how important it is for them to have intention.
Yeah.
Like what you mentioned on, here's what I'm going to do, and here are ways in which I can change without ruining my life.
Yeah. So, such a good question. And so let me play on that for a moment. It's, it's further on down the list, but it's related to this exploration thing. Students will change their minds. Statistically, what we're finding is that they're more likely to change their minds within a meta major than outside, like from within business, from accounting to marketing, rather than from nursing to art. But they will do that too. Here's what happens. When students attempt to enroll in classes that are not a part of their program of study, most colleges are creating technological triggers that will say you need to see your advisor. And it is not to say you can't do this. It is to say let's talk about it. I say you want to take these courses. So yeah, I really am passionate about this thing and it's really what I want to do. And so then you have to go through the same conversation again. Okay, let's talk about if you're changing majors, these classes will move with you, but you will have to take these additional classes and it will take this much money and this much time. And then you will have these transfer options and these job options, right? So it's not about saying you can't change your mind. It's about saying making informed decisions about changing your mind and what that will cost you in terms of time and money, and then what opportunities it opens up. So one of the things that we suggest to program faculty working with advisors in the meta majors is, first thing to do is to look across those programs and create a common first semester course schedule. Why would we do that?
Because it would work into all programs. So like if your first semester is English, math, reading, possibly an exploration area that'll work as a social behavioral or humanity or science. And then I like to always push the CPD 150, which has the career exploration component in it.
Hopefully you won't have to push it because hopefully it will be required part of that pathway. But the one thing I would add to the thing, to the common first semester is add a first course in the program area.
Yeah.
Why? You all know the answer to this question.
Motivation.
Because it's motivation. It's sticky, that's my technical term. Students need to get connected to their content, their program of study early. And so one of the powerful predictors we've got from other pathways colleges, we need to get them into one program area course in their first semester and two in the second semester. Other than that, you've got it right. And what you're doing is two things that are valuable. One is keeping options open for students so that they have that first semester, but you're also sort of intentionally creating a cohort within that meta major so that students are with other students who share their interests, students are meeting faculty, students are creating study groups, students are doing the things that you would want to encourage if you're being intentional about creating a large-scale learning community. Are you
Can I ask
listening?
a question
Yeah,
about the CPD?
yeah.
So are we recommending that all students take CPD, 3-credit class, career exploration, their very first semester?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's including students who may have already identified what they want to do?
Yeah, because I'm assuming that, some of them may change their minds, and I think you would make that argument too. Once they get exposed to some other options or possibilities, or this really cool thing that ASU does in partnership with America, whatever. So they may change their minds, but there are also other content areas of that class that are going to be important. The stuff about growth mindset, the stuff about study skills and college success. And so
Just
on.
want to add to that, that is going to increase their number of credits, likely increase the number of credits over 60 to 64
I'm
for
okay with
certain-
64 if that's the reason.
for certain programs.
Yeah.
And also, I wonder, how do we require it curriculum-wise? Because, you know, it's not part of the Arizona General Education curriculum. So how do you tell students that you have to take this when it's not part of a degree program or something like that?
That's right. The good news about it is that it transfers. It transfers as an elective, but it transfers. So that is a benefit. And because it's part of the program, it's eligible for financial aid, and that's a benefit. But I think the answer to that question is that it's going to help students survive to transfer.
I'm not against the course, I'm just asking about how this might work. I do have a question though, and maybe Jim can answer this. When students go through CPD, the career course, how many students identify a career path and stick with that career path?
So they do identify career paths. How well they stick with it, we know that they stay in community college longer than those that don't take it. We don't do a good job of tracking what their starting, middle, and final major is, or what they major at the next level, or what the career is after they major in that.
So I'm just saying
We need
that that's
to
a
get that data.
I'm just saying that is a huge investment in money, in personnel, to say everybody's going to go through CPD when they come in as a freshman. I mean, that's just, it's huge. And I would argue that I would like to sit down and talk about, are there other ways of helping students identify careers than making an investment like that?
Perfectly legitimate conversation. I mean, it is. And the questions should apply to anything that we say is required of students.
Because let me say,
there needs to be a rationale for that and
Yeah.
a return on investment conversation.
right, because one other thing, and I'll you know, we can move on, but just to say, I can think of a lot of classes, maybe not a lot, but several, that our students would benefit from more or as much.
Okay,
And
so
that
let me
question,
speak
that's
for
why that question,
Okay.
that needs to be discussed.
I'll tell you something that I can say with certainty, and then I want to give Tanisha an opening here. I said I've done hundreds of focus groups with students. And I'll tell you what students have, and I've become really obnoxious about this, and I'm well known around the country for making this point. And it's why you have a lot of required parts of your interim student experience. When I do focus groups with students, they would say to me, this experience should be required.
They
And
talk
I'm
about
thinking,
that for
they're
a
not
lot
going
of
to
things.
believe me when I go to Paradise Valley and tell them you said that. And they could be talking about the student success course, which they usually were, or orientation, or a required study group outside of class. They're talking about a number of different things, but very specifically about the student success course. And so, because I didn't think you'd believe them, I pushed back and I said, so talk to me about that. Do you really mean required? And then they get all huffy and define required for me. I mean, they actually the word they use, and I've got them on video saying this, they say this should be mandatory. Mandatory. And I said, do you really mean mandatory? Yeah. They said, yeah, that means it should be required of all students. And then I say, okay, so suppose you came to this college and they told you that the student success course was required. What would you do? And they say, first we'd whine. And I say, okay, first you'd whine. Then what would you do? Well, then we take it. Why would you take it? Because you said we had to. And then they will testify that it's what helped them be successful and stay in college, partly because of the content, partly because of the learning community piece, the peer-to-peer stuff, partly because of the relationship with the person teaching the course. But they're very clear about that, and that's why I will stand here and tell you students don't do optional. And a college in Kentucky gave me the t-shirt. that says that. So it's going to be on my gravestone. But I know this because students everywhere across the country have told me.
Just one more thought.
Yeah.
I haven't been into hundreds of student, groups, okay, and asking students. I'll say, I've been around for 41 years.
You've
so-
seen some students.
And I do know that students also complain about taking a CPD course and how it was worthless, and I already knew this stuff. And sometimes the unintended consequence is that, well, I don't have to take it to graduate, and I don't have to take it at ASU.
I
So
just
go
have to
ahead and
take it to
require it
register
all
next
you want,
semester.
but I'm not going to take it.
They do take it at ASU. There is
Well-
a course there, and it's mandatory.
But not a 3 credit?
So let me say one other thing here, just to make a point. And Tanisha, I promise you, you're next. This is the place where I typically exploit my granddaughter. My oldest granddaughter is a recent graduate of Dartmouth University. And so at the end of her freshman year at Dartmouth, I did a grueling 4-hour one-person focus group with my granddaughter. And she was very good-natured about that. And so I have a series of questions for you. One is, do you think that orientation was optional at Dartmouth?
No.
Do you think that participation in the entire first-year experience was optional at Dartmouth?
No.
Do you think that her physics professor invited her maybe sometime if she felt like it and it was convenient to drop by the physics lab? No. And so my next question is, this is what Dartmouth has figured out is required for Dartmouth students to be successful and graduate at very high rates. Do you think our students need less structure than Dartmouth students do? No. I don't think so.
I didn't say it wasn't a good
Now,
course.
what I want to grant you is if we're going to require an experience, it darn well better be a good one. And we have to continually evaluate and improve and tailor. Those experiences probably need to be tailored to the meta majors so that they're contextualized, so that students are part of that learning community. So we have that quality obligation. We do. And I appreciate you putting that on the table, Tanisha.
I just wanted to share in terms of our policy. We have policy around what is mandatory and what is not around those enrollment steps, which includes that component of the college success course. It does not always have to be a 3-credit course. It can be a 1-credit course, depending on the options that the students need to take. And there are components in the curriculum still related to resources, study skills, career development as part of that course. And it's tailored at this point where it's required for students that are testing into at least one developmental education course. So we're looking at the cohort of students that are coming in that are degree seeking or transfer seeking that have tested into at least one developmental education course. They are required to complete a college success course within the first year. And it can be a 1-credit course or a 3-credit course.
I hear you. That's not what Kay said. That's all. I was responding to what Kay was saying.
But those components of how standardized that is and what that curriculum looks like and what the experience is for students is something that I think has a responsibility from all of us in terms of how we promote that, what we understand about those components, and how we're supporting our students and answering those questions that Kay had mentioned before.
I'm not saying it's a
about
bad
what students
course.
want to
I
know.
wasn't saying it was a bad course. I like what we're doing. I was just responding.
Well,
Are we
and
saying
having
everybody's
heard
going to
41
take
years of
CPD,
student complaints,
3 credits? That's all
Right,
I'm
I'm just also letting you know about the policy that the district currently has. So I'm
I
trying
hear,
to
I
also
know
connect
it.
that
I know
piece
them.
too.
Okay, we're moving on because we don't have unlimited time.
Anything important is the time.
Give you a minute to read this. Any of you concerned that by providing more guiding, advising, and coherent pathways that we're going to disable students? That's a real question. All right, is that something we need to pause and talk about? No, okay. You could insert faculty in this question, and then it becomes a question that lots of people in lots of places will raise. And the truth is that in becoming more coherent we are trying to produce a more consistently high-quality experience for students so that they're getting the same story from everyone about what's required and what's not, and what the pathway is, and that sort of thing. We are asking people to step out of their individual offices if they're faculty and come to agreement about a program sequence and about things like, should the success course be a part of every student's pathways and that sort of thing. And so since higher education is an industry that traditionally has attracted a lot of, I don't think I want to say loners, but I want to say people who like having control over their own thing, there's kind of a cultural change that goes on here because it calls for collaboration and consensus and consistency across the student experience. And so I just think it's fair to acknowledge that that's a part of what we do. This is gonna, I was about to make a comment that will come up in a minute. So you can see what the rationale under that question is. This we've been talking about, so I'm not going to dwell here again, but I think you'll see the sort of documentation of the kinds of points that have been made.
I was going to ask a question on the last slide, but I just was wondering, because I don't know this, but are there minimum and desired goals for an academic advisor that is going to have to change or be addressed?
Yes.
Okay, so, yeah, and we're going to come to a question that's very much about advising capacity in that, but the answer in the colleges I've worked with is typically yes. That this causes us to go back and review what the role and job description is for advisors, and to ask the question, are we all prepared to do this, to do it well, to feel strong and confident about it? And some are implementing very thoughtful training, professional development operations, and certifications. So that's a college decision, but it's a good question. Okay, let me see. This one is the one we've been talking about, so I'm going to move on quickly. What happens if students change their mind? We talked about that. You get to talk to them, and you get to talk to them about the implications of changing your mind and what the costs and benefits will be so that they can make a good choice. Okay, so I want to pause here because this is exceedingly important to me personally, and it's also, I think, important to darn near everyone I meet in a community college educational setting. And so throughout the process of designing guided pathways, we need to be sure that we are bringing an equity lens to the way we design the student experience so that we are designing equity into it rather than out of it. And let me give you some examples of what I mean that I think will come close to home. Tony Carnevale at the National Center on Workforce and the Economy a couple of years ago published a study that shows that across American higher education, both community colleges and universities, that Black and Hispanic students are enrolled in disproportionately high numbers in programs that lead to low-paying jobs. Now let that sink in for just a minute. I'm going to say to you that part of the effect, part of the process that produces that outcome is us. And often it's us being people of goodwill trying to do something that we think is good for students. Like, we can get you into this welding program, get you out in 6 months and you'll be making $30,000. Or we could get you into this 1-year nursing assistant program and we don't ever have the conversation about the pediatric cardiologist. And so our behaviors in advising, apparently based on the data, close down options and opportunities rather than opening them up. And we don't do that because we are intentionally limiting students' lifetimes, but we do it. We don't intentionally limit, but we do limit. And so as we think about advisor training and the way we work with students in making choices about a meta major and a particular program of study, we've got to have that lens on that says, how do we not be a part of systematically perpetuating racial and economic divides when what we think we're in business to do as a community college is to eradicate these things? That's kind of tough, isn't it? Is it important enough to talk about? I think it is. I'm really sure that it is. And so what are the other things that could happen as we design this student experience, as we design our new entry processes, our new guided pathways, that could inadvertently create disproportionate outcomes across the student population? That is a question I commend to you in every single meeting that we have that is about designing and implementing guided pathways. The darkest downside of this model that we're talking about is that it could devolve into 1950s style tracking. I don't think any one of us wants to be a part of that, so we have to proactively, consciously, intentionally ask ourselves the questions of what we need to do in designing this process that's going to keep us from going there. Yeah.
You're going to provide us some best practices on that at some point?
Well, I'm going to count on you to invent some of them. Because honestly, this is a continuing plague across American higher education, and quite evidently, based on the data, there aren't enough of us that are countering it. And this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity because we are redesigning the student experience to try to ensure that we're not going to do it. And so then I will tell you about another piece of data analysis you can do that I've forced on more than one other community college. So we talked earlier about doing an analysis of enrollment by program, right? So that you'll know across all of your programs of study how many students are in this program. And then we will ask you to analyze graduates by program. Sometimes that's really reinforcing, and sometimes it's hard to look at because you'll find that you have programs that no one's graduated from in 10 years. And then you'll just have to, all data like that cause questions, and they should. My recommendation to you is that you do this analysis. You take your 5 programs of study that lead to the highest paying jobs and careers, and you aggregate those enrollments and you analyze the student demographics. And you take your 5 lowest paying programs that lead to the lowest paying jobs, and you do the same thing. And then send me a postcard and tell me how you feel about it. Then you can have a rational discussion about the situation that I'm talking about. So let me give you a really hard example. Do you have an early childhood program?
Yes.
Okay, so this is pretty perfect. You looked at early childhood employment across the country. Where are the salaries?
Pretty low.
They're in the tank. There's a Stanford-based woman who's a feminist economist, like that, and her analysis of labor market migration is that the same people migrate from working at McDonald's to working in early childhood settings to working in geriatric centers, all at very low wages. Okay?
In higher education too?
Look, yeah. And
That's what I
so
thought.
here, then you look at the employment pattern. Stop me when I lie, folks. In early childhood employment, the people at the service level are predominated by women of color, women who are black and brown. You get to the management level, you'll find some white women, no men, and all of them are low paid relative to other professions. So here we have a real dilemma as community colleges. This is, and I had this discussion with a group of California college presidents just 2 weeks ago. We're interested in equity and opportunity and closing those gaps. And yet, early childhood workers is a need of our communities, right? We need those people. And so what we're doing in offering those programs is feeding the beast. Or at least I can make that assertion. It's just a conversation we need to have. There's a community college chancellor of a multi-campus district in Texas who said to her people that we need to look at our programs, and if we're offering programs where students go through 1 or 2 years of college education and they're not making more money when they get out than they were before they came, then we need to ask ourselves a question about whether that is a public service, whether that's, you know, intellectually and ethically where we want to be. That's not so easy, is it? Should we be asking that question? Yeah.
I think it's more than just at the community college itself. I work with the men's program, different males, students come in. I think it's what the student brings into the community college, because when they come in, we're asking them to take a placement.
Yeah.
So this standardized placement test that they have. So they may not have the information, the knowledge, they may not be prepared to take a placement test because of the education they have received. Standardized testing in America, United States, is not designed for this demographic of people, because you're using these standardized tests against 3rd and 4th graders to predict that they will be incarcerated later. So if you're using that as a model to incarcerate them, you're not using it as a model to educate them. So that's what they're doing with.
Well, right, and so thank you, because that's another important aspect of the equity lens. If as those students or prospective students come to our college, the first message they get, and they say this to me in focus groups, the first thing you told me is what my teachers in high school told me, which is that I'm deficient, that I'm inadequate, that I'm not college material. That's the first and most powerful message that many of those students get from us because of the way we do the intake process. I know that there is some work going on those brush-ups that help students perform better, but that's, you know, we need to think about that as a contributor to disproportionate outcomes.
So do we unconsciously not set our expectations high?
Yes. We unconsciously have different kinds of expectations that students, you know this, students get those messages about what our expectations are for their ability to handle college, to do a certain kind of program. And those, from people like us in power and authority, those are very powerful messages. And so this is the equity lens that we have to bring to all the conversations about designing the entry experience, designing the advising experience, and providing, here's another thing, did a whole series of focus groups with men of color in community colleges. And most community college students who need support services don't participate in them. That's what I can tell you from my 13 years of research. We offer a lot of stuff that they don't use, which is why I say we have to embed those supports in the pathways so that they're inescapable. Because when I interview men of color, they say, why would I go to the tutoring center when just one more time it's going to be somebody telling me I'm inadequate, I'm deficient in some way. And they talk about the element of pride that will prohibit them from getting the support services that they need, which is why I say we provide it to all students, and we make it a built-in, designed part of the way we do college here, because we know they need the support. And now, this woman is telling me that I have to stop talking. I hope that you got some of your questions answered, and that you will hold questions that are going to be important to the way you make this work at Paradise Valley. And I really look forward to working with all of you at another time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. McClenny. You are definitely bringing up some keeping it real type of conversations that we need to be having here as we start to really look at what we're going to be doing moving forward. What we need to consider as part of the design, and you're sharing the design principles and creating some questions around advising and some of our student services that are going to be relevant to our frontline staff and our managers as we support our students and look at what we can do to be sustainable for the student populations that we have coming in future semesters and decades and years. I also just want to welcome all of you to stay for lunch. Lunch is served. There will be a session after this that is specifically targeted towards faculty. And our Dr. McClenny will be around, so if you still have questions or want to have conversations with her, please allow her to answer those questions probably between bites and sips, but we hope that you will stay, so thank you.